And I'd like to introduce, I think we've got two of the titans in the DevOps and Lean community here, representing two of the titans in aerospace and defense. And we've got Suzette Johnson and Robin Yeman.
Awesome.
And I've been
And is it working? Oh, good, it's working.
A very big fan of their work and the way they've been able to apply these concepts in a sophisticated, complex, and very interesting environment. So they're going to share their lessons with you.
Very cool. Awesome. Let's see. Am I doing it right? Huh. Oop. We're having technical difficulties. Oh, there we are. Oh, now I've got to go back.
All right.
Thank you. Thanks. So actually, one of the things that Suzette and I have been working on this year, just so you know, the government's really put forth a lot of energy trying to move to a lot of the commercial practices that they haven't had in the past as much. Right? So what I wanted to do is kind of walk you through what things that Northrop, Lockheed, and actually we're a part of a larger group, working group, on how we're responding to something that's called the DoD Science Board report. And in October, they put the recommendations for this report into legislation. It's Section 866 of the Defense Acquisition Policy. So it's going to be a big impact in our community. Oh, we probably should have introduced ourselves. You go introduce yourself first.
Okay.
Do it to it.
I'm Suzette Johnson. I work for Northrop Grumman. I run our Agile Center of Excellence for the company. We're 90,000 people. So there's a Center of Excellence that helps provide guidance and the training and the coaching and working with our programs and our internal business as well with their Agile journey. I've been there probably since about 2000, so I'm working there about 18 years in this space. I also am our Agile transformation lead, so not just looking at providing the guidance, but how do we continue to evolve these practices? Because 90,000 people, we're not all Agile yet, just saying.
Really?
But yeah, we're working it. Yeah, anyway, so a lot of great things are going on and helping to continue that journey across our company.
And I'm Robin Yeman. I work at Lockheed Martin, and I've been there 25 years, so a long time. Been working Agile programs since about 2002, not because we're bleeding edge kind of personalities, but really that's when the intelligence community started putting them into our RFPs or requests for proposals. So it was kind of required. And so we had to learn how to come up to speed on it pretty quickly. And now I spend a lot of time, just like Suzette, managing our community of practice, really trying to work across our programs and help them adopt a lot of these practices. And it's been a lot of banging your head against the wall at times. That's why I love this report, because I think that it's been really helpful this year in being able to help our executives realize why this is so important.
Right, and I think the important thing to note too, with Lockheed and Northrop, even though we're competitors, we're also teammates. A lot of the big systems we actually work on together, along with the customer, with the government as well. So this is actually an industry and government effort, right, of all of us collaborating and working together to move forward and making sure we're delivering mission value at the time that it's needed.
All right, so this is the report. These were the recommendations that they made. There was a group of folks, government and I believe MITRE and some other folks like that kind of help out the government, that did a lot of research. They went to visit a lot of different businesses such as Google, Amazon, Netflix. They got to go all over the place and ask them what makes them successful. Why are they able to deliver that much faster? Why are they getting things out the door quicker? What kinds of things should they be trying to do in the government space? So they made these recommendations. The number one, and it kind of repeats itself when you look throughout, but the number one thing is build a software factory, right? So from my perspective, this is your people, process, and tools. But in your tools, what do I need? An integrated tool chain that all talks to each other so that I can pass data all the way through, right? So build the software factory. They said build our workforce. We actually have a lot more outgoing than incoming. There's not enough computer science or software engineering majors coming out of school that's actually replacing the retiring workforce. Look at new metrics. This one I loved because it was the first time somebody actually validated in my space that yes, source lines of code is a bad metric, right? I hate it. So they actually said that. That we should have test automation, right? So we need to automate tests at every level. Modernize our infrastructure. In some places, based upon the security clearances and things like that, we actually have engineers that are still doing, a lot of their work in tools like VI. They haven't even upgraded to, let's say, Emacs or XEmacs or, let alone Eclipse, right? So we've got that. I added this one. They didn't put that in, but I think it's coming, right? Build security in. We have to secure our factories. They talked about making sure that we looked at the entire value stream, not just software, right? So end to end, and then relentless improvement and collaboration. So these are the recommendations that they made, and we're gonna walk through in detail a little more of these. All right. So the software factory, like I said, people, process, and tools, and this is actually my piece of the NDIA document that I'm working on, is what does that look like? And so we've got to build up, what are those skills I need? So things like boot camps for our software engineers to teach them secure coding, right? To teach them test-driven development, to teach them things that they're actually not coming out of college with. I can tell you this because I actually have a son in computer science in his 3rd year at UCF, and that computer science degree looks a lot like the one, and maybe even exactly like the one I took about 28 years ago. So I don't know. we got some work on the academics. The tools and automation. And then this is one example, my example, this is the one I demonstrated to him, of a software factory, right? So that library here, right now, I have a tool set in our space that we call Sparta, right? And that piece, that's where we use Tasktop, is to try to make these things talk together. My opinion or thought process is this. These tools are going to get shorter and shorter life cycles, and I need to be able to put something in and put something out and really standardize at the data layer, as opposed to standardizing, being able to do point-to-point integration for all of these tools. So from a tools perspective, this is my integrated tool chain. And I didn't put specific products in here because I'm really not supposed to, recommend one over another. We're tool agnostic. But products that do these kind of things so that I can have an end-to-end delivery life cycle. I'll let you go to the next one.
So building the workforce, that's been one of the challenges because their world is changing, right? How we do business, how we build products, how we collaborate to build products. And creating these cross-functional teams. And creating cross-functional teams doesn't just mean I have a developer and a tester and a systems engineer, but it's actually creating the skills and competencies so that every individual has some of those skills. So how do we cross-train those people? How do we mentor them? And the value of that too is then they recognize and they understand how they need to grow into these positions. Because sometimes there's fear, like, am I going to have a job? How do I fit in? I don't know where I provide value. So trying to figure out what works best in our environments and creating those environments where we have not just the training, because the training sometimes is just a couple days, right? And that's not really enough. But after training, how do we go in and mentor and coach each other through the process and through the changes? Yeah.
You want to talk to that one? You want me to?
Yeah. Okay, so we can share. But the Slack, of course, we recognize that we are still, in some cases, asked to provide Slack counts for different reasons. Then there's some, I guess, maybe some reasons that provide value to somebody as to what those numbers are. But really looking at what are these new metrics? What is it that we want to look at, right? It's not just quality, but also in terms of our productivity, our performance. How quickly are we actually delivering mission? And that is one thing that the integrated tool environments will help us, because then we'll actually be able to measure our lead and cycle time of how quickly are we not just delivering, but actually from the time we recognize a need, getting it through the system, which is one of probably our most important metrics.
Yes, no, absolutely. And so these were the ones that they did put into the report. Now, I don't know if I would say, hey, burn down's a metric, but that is one of the ones they put in. More than willing to track it. But I was very happy to see cycle time, lead time, a lot of the things that you've actually seen in the commercial space. And even looking at, they want to see velocity over time. But source lines of code, right? And the only real problem, I don't know, my problem with it is when we call it a productivity metric, right? It's not a problem to track Slack, but if I'm telling my developers that they're more productive if they write more lines of code, that's probably not actually the outcome I want.
So then looking at testing at every level, so this is our famous V model from the systems engineering community. So if you are in systems engineering within DoD, you are very familiar with what the traditional V model. So now it's looking at the V model and thinking about how do we build testing and build the automation in, not just at the level, at the coding level, at the unit test level, but building in test and automation all the way through from the story level or the code level all the way up to the end-to-end flow, and how do we automate those?
And I actually just saw, so I'm probably going to steal it, but we haven't yet, is another V model where there's the shift left, so it's like a sideways V, and I'm like, oh, that's a great one. So that we can make sure. But usually if we're getting requirements, they kind of come in this way, and then we align them to things like epics, sub-epics, capabilities, features, whatnot to get them into, more of an agile approach. Modernizing our infrastructure is actually a really big deal. We have a lot of systems out there that have been out there for 25, 30 years. Maybe even longer, right? So I've got programs like Aegis, or, believe it or not, even F-35 is 10, 15 years old, right? It's not, immediate. So how do I actually move from my existing type of architecture, infrastructure, and tool sets to newer ones, right? How do I move from, let's say, a clear case and a clear quest to a Git? We're very tightly coupled. We're very tightly integrated for things to do that. So being able to take our legacy system and determine, how do I move it, right? Can I get to the cloud, right? First thing is, can I get to virtualization? Then can I get to the cloud? So I might be looking at things like rehosting, replatforming, repurchasing. Could be, I don't have anything that is going to actually hold this, so I've got to just start over. Or refactoring. Now, most of the things that we tend to do are really in the rehosting and replatforming. I don't see a lot of repurchasing, but this is a huge deal for our engineers. I go work with some of them, and what happens is they're actually working on these tools that just don't enable things like continuous integration or automated tests. They, builds that would take 4 days or, just way too long. So this is a big deal for us to be able to do the kinds of things that the government's actually asking for. I presented this last year, but I went through the whole thing. But I am a big fan of building security into the pipeline. I always call it, guardrails, not gates. And if you saw me bowling, right, I always absolutely need those bumpers. That's totally me, right? So that's what I'm trying to do, is provide bumpers. How do I build hacker stories and security stories into the backlog? How can I start by building automated security tests, right? Working with OWASP to make sure that I have the latest vulnerabilities so that the teams can actually build that right into their pipeline, as opposed to having security where we have really, not enough of those guys at the very end being able to validate and verify everything. So we want to build as much in so we can minimize going backwards in that value stream. Defensive coding, that's one of the reasons I have my teams building hacker stories, because before, you know, we've really started to push on how do I test it, right? But now I don't want you to just test it. I want you to know how somebody else is going to exploit it on you. And we don't naturally out of the gate think like that. Like, that's just not how you think about it. So we're really having to build this all the way through to make a more secure product.
And I think one of the things that we've seen is security used to be this group over here, and now they're actually integrated as part of the product teams, integrated as part of the teams, integrated as part of the planning as well, also integrated as far as helping the development understand what are those requirements that we need to build to, and then also with some of these testing, where can we automate some of the security testing as we go through the development cycle.
Want to take that one?
Yes. So we were talking earlier, we keep talking about the value stream, right? We have the development value stream, and as part of that development value stream, there's actually a lot of supporting areas around that support the value stream, like our programmatics, our PMO office, our finances, right, our contracts, how we subcontract with our teammates. And thinking through that is making sure that they're understanding what it is we're after. How do we build one for agility? Because that's one of the things that we're seeking with our development pipeline and delivery pipelines is how do we build for agility? How do we work in a different way? How do we measure progress? How do we measure success? Because how we used to measure it looks very different than what we're measuring now. Now we're starting to talk about lead and cycle time. Well, you know, 10 years ago, that wasn't part of our programmatics of how we were reporting progress. Also, how we're going to work with our contractors and how we collaborate together, because we want to be able to deliver, because some of our components actually have to integrate on a regular basis. Some of that has to be built, that type of collaboration and expectation actually has to be built into our contract vehicles as well to allow for that type of collaboration.
I don't know how many of you guys work in the government space out there. Do some of you? Right, so a lot of times we get a contract and they put the work breakdown structure in there, right? We get the work breakdown structure and it's very functionally based. It's exactly the opposite of what we would want from a product or an outcome based, right? And we've got to try to do gymnastics and all this stuff to try to actually make it work. So being able to train our program managers, I spend a lot of time, I teach like the PMI ACP boot camp, right? Because they think it's still, or in many cases, we're getting better all the time. That's something those software guys do, right? I really need contracts all in. Actually, I have my entire team read the contract, and I get people to say, really, do they really have to do that? Yeah, they really have to do that. Because what happens, or what's happened to me in the past, is sometimes the government moves out of their positions faster than we do. Actually, they do it all the time. And what happens there is we make these great backlog agreements with our folks, and then that contract isn't staying current. It can be a problem. So really working with these guys is a good thing. DevOps, like you guys already know, been around since 2009, I think they coined the term, right? And then it's been called everything, you know, it's DevSecOps, DevOpsSec, it's got other things included in there. One of the things that I've been working with our folks at Lockheed on is how do I build this intelligence highway, right? Each one of these areas at each step provides me more information, right? So as I'm developing things for space, or I'm developing things for aeronautics or flight, right? The first line of defense is going to be that automated begin with the unit test, integration test. I'm getting data, feed that back in, help my teams. The next one would be that CI/CD build, right? My continuous integration, my continuous delivery build. Feed that back in. Then we have higher level verification, validation. We have flight test, all different kinds of tests. Oop, I just took the button. But anyway, we've got all different kinds of tests, things of that nature. So what do we need to do there? feed that back in. So that entire intelligence highway allows us to build the next system, every system after, better and better and better. So I've been working with the teams on making sure that everything we do feeds that intelligence highway.
Yep. And along with the relentless improvement is making sure we have the regular time to inspect about how things are working for us, looking at our metrics and looking at improvement metrics as well, and taking that regular time and then feeding it back into our processes so that while we have retrospectives, security is a part of those retrospectives as well for our continuous improvement program.
Absolutely. Did you want to take this one? These are like a lot of the, so both Suzette and I, we have this crazy story where the first time I actually met her, you know, I was doing a presentation. She's like, I think you just did my presentation. Like, it was so the same.
Even the metrics, it was like
yeah.
Interesting. It was.
So this space is, you know, everybody says they're unique. The government space is kind of unique. So anyway, we're both very passionate about being able to make change in this environment. And we volunteer and work a lot with ADAPT, which is a working group for the government to, you know, they have the Agile conference that they set up is in the spring,
Yep.
things like that.
And it's local, so if for those
Yeah,
that are
if you ever
local.
want to come. NDIA, so that's the National Defense Industrial Association. So that's the working group where we're working on the response to the DSB report. SEI and Carnegie Mellon does a lot of work with us. The GAO actually has an Agile working group as well. How does the government acquisition organization build contracts, things like that? How do they measure? How do they look at the color of money? That's an interesting thing that they're starting to find. How do they actually fund things like value streams as opposed to projects? All of these are new concepts for them. And then PARCA and DCMA. So PARCA writes policy for performance in the government space. They're most commonly referred to as, you know, kind of the people that are writing the earned value performance documentation. I know that in the commercial side, many of you probably don't have to do earned value, but we have to do earned value for a lot of things. And then they write the policy. DCMA actually audits us against that policy. Right? So we've done a lot of work with them in as far as how do we build performance data that aligns to how you would run an Agile program. That was fast.
You're good.
Yeah. So because we're fast,
Yes.
how about questions? What do you guys think? I know that there weren't a lot of questions on the last one, but if you don't ask me questions, I'll probably ask them to you. So I would ask questions. Yes?
Have you impacted the acquisition process at all with Agile and made that process more?
So have I?
Or has
In general, I would say yes.
Yeah, well, it's
there's a
definitely
lot of
happened, but I think
discussions on that.
the government's doing a lot of work there. I'd like to say that I had an impact, but they're actually obviously driving it. I'd love. 18F has done a lot of work in the federal space that's been proliferated into the intelligence community, into DoD, stuff like that. So yes, you're seeing changes in acquisition policy and process. I think I was just talking to somebody last week. Typically, it's about 2 to 3 years in acquisition, let's say for a space vehicle. So you're looking at about 36 months. And then typically development is about 90 months for deployment, right? So when we're actually building something and getting it deployed, you're looking at about 10 to 12 years, right? So SpaceX is kind of turning that upside down on its head. So I do see a lot of things happening in the acquisition space. How many of you guys actually have to track earned value?
Oh.
Really? That's awesome. Okay. Any other questions? If you do get a chance, I would go out and look at the DoD Science Board report. It was delivered in February of 2018, and like I said, it was passed into legislation in October of 2018. So I think lots of changes to come in the government space.
Great. Thank you.
All right, Yeman is going to announce a giveaway, and thank you, Suzette. Thank you, Robin.
Just real quick, I want to again remind folks to visit our very, very generous sponsors, Tricentis, Milello, and Platora. Platora is giving an Apple Watch giveaway, and my understanding is there aren't that many people signed up, so your chances are much higher right now. Probably lower after I announce this. So anyways, please visit our sponsors. They've been so kind to kind of help make this day possible. So with that, I'll let the program continue.